Aronson. I've been doing Timeslips training and supporting Timeslips implementation since the early 90s. Before that, I was in public accounting, helping small business with their financial statements and tax returns. And a lot of my clients back then were attorneys, and when technology started to take hold, we moved a lot of them from manual systems to automated systems, and that's basically how I found Timeslips. If you're watching this training, you know how important backups are, and I'm glad to see that. I've heard way too many horror stories of servers failing, backups failing, and corruption in all the backups that a network company might have as in their rotation. A lot of them would have a cycle of 10 days, and sometimes corruption, just if you don't catch it early enough, will end up being in all the backups, and then if you don't protect yourself, you're out of luck. So I know that we can help show you how to protect your mission critical backups, your mission critical data, and we'll do that over the next half hour or so. Okay, if anybody has any questions, you can reach me. Here's my phone number and email address. You can contact me anytime, as well as you can get that information from my website. You can always click on this link and get to my website. Okay, let's just briefly review what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about where to create and store your backups. We're going to talk about and cover setting up your preferences, your personal preferences, to make sure the backups go into the right places, or the right place. Then we'll talk about the actual backup process, the naming convention. We'll look at some potential cautions to be aware of, the size of the database, the backup itself. And we'll talk about, and I'll give you my suggestions on a retention policy. We'll look at how Timeslips has allowed you to schedule backups so you can do them automatically, and it basically takes no time at all. And then finally, we'll look at some other situations where you might need and use a backup. Okay, before we get started though, I wanted to ask a couple of questions just so I know where everybody basically is coming from, how long you've been using Timeslips. If you could let me know how long you've been using Timeslips by just letting me know in this poll. That way I get a better sense of where you're coming from. Okay. I'll give you another second. You can put in your response. And then the other question I wanted to know was what version are you using currently? So if you can let me know what version you're using, that would be good. And finally, how many timekeepers that, or licenses, how many Timeslips licenses or timekeepers you have. That's extremely helpful. Thank you very much. All right. So now that we have that, why don't we get right into it, and let's look at timeslips and backups. I'm going to share my screen here, and what I'm using is, oops, let me get to my desktop. I thought I had it open, sorry. What I'm using is Timeslips 2015, which is currently the latest version. And the first thing you want to do before you do a backup is to actually set up the spot where you want the backups to go. So what I would do is in my Timeslips folder, and this should be on the server, the Timeslips folder on the server, I'm using it on my local workstation at the moment. But you'd set up a backup folder inside the Timeslips folder on the server. You do not want it to go into the data folder. This is the data folder we're going to use today, the Explore data. You do not want to put the backups inside the data folder. When you do that, the backups will back up those backups, but it'll create a larger file, a larger backup file. So it'll slow down the backup, and it'll take longer to restore the backup, and there are cleaner ways to make sure that your backups are backed up, and we'll look at that. All right, so we're going to put the backups in the backup folder underneath the Timeslips folder on the server. All right, then in Timeslips, you set up your preferences, your personal preferences, and this is a personal preference file. This actually is a preference file that is in the Timeslips folder on the local workstation for each user. This has a place in the Other tab in the database path to set a default for where your backups are going to go. So you'd set your preference to that same spot on the server, the Timeslips backups folder. So then when you back up, Timeslips will know automatically where it needs to go. Okay, so then again, that's the preference file, the local preference file for each individual user who's going to back up. And in here in the startup, you'd say and tell Timeslips whether this person has the rights or is allowed to back up the database on exit. So there's a couple of ways you could do it. When you exit the program, it'll ask you, if you have this set, to back up automatically. It's a good reminder this way to have that checked. Okay, so that's the personal preferences. Now before we back up, we have to make sure that everybody is out of the database. And if you're not familiar with how to do that, you'd go to the special menu, Station Administrator, and you'd look and see who's in the database. Currently, I'm the only one in. But if there were multiple people, on this first page, it only tells you the computer name, and so a lot of times you don't know who has what computer, so you'd go to the options and licenses and use, and it would tell you who has what computer, and you just ask them to exit Timeslips because you can't back up with multiple people in the database. This shows here twice because I've accessed Timeslips through two different pathways. Normally, this should only be in here once. I'm doing this. I've gone through Timeslips on my local machine, and I'm also going through this webinar, so it sees it as a different machine, actually, or a different pathway, and it actually will take a separate license. So I'll end up having to clear that one later on. Okay, so once we know everybody's out of the database, we want to make sure that while we're doing it, they don't come back into the database and disrupt the process. So I'd go back here to special again and go to exclusive mode, and I would put a message in here. I have the database locked in exclusive mode. I'm doing a backup. Please wait a few minutes and try again. Something like that. And then once I've done that, down at the bottom in the right-hand corner, it says we're in exclusive mode. So every time someone tries to get into the database, they're going to get that message and they won't be allowed in. Once the backup is complete, then we can just go back up here to special, to the exclusive mode, and allow other workstations to have access to the database. The message goes away. Now, besides getting the option when you exit the database to back up, you can also go to the File menu and back up from here. It will tell you what the current database is we're backing up, and this obviously would match the database down here in the left-hand corner. And I have this one on my C drive, but yours should probably would definitely be a network drive where you would have Timeslips, your Timeslips database. It tells you where your last backup was, and then this is a good place you could check to make sure the backup's going to where it's supposed to go. And if you're looking for a backup on the server and it's not there, this is a good place to come to check and see whether or not the actual backup went to the spot it was supposed to go to, because it'll show you the last backup here. All right, so when you say yes, you do want to include the subfolders, and it'll ask you, it should go right to that spot, and it does here. If it doesn't, you would change it. And then you would name the backup today's date. And the reason why we do that is we don't want to have it just say a generic Timeslips backup. If we do that, then every time you back up, it's going to overwrite the previous backup, and it gives you, in effect, just one backup, when we want as many backups as we can in order to help us have the best chance to recover any data that may become corrupt. So I've done one already today, and if I do multiple ones during the day, I just append it with a B, and then I save. This is that's all there really is to it. It's a very quick process. Now, the backups, if it slows, the process is slower, that just means the backups are getting larger. If it's under, when you look at the size of the backup, if it's, so you can look at the size of the backup. These are tiny because they're the Explore backups, but if they get to, some of my clients have 200-300 meg backups, which is not uncommon, and those are usually fine. In the 3 to 500 meg size, you're still okay. You want to just watch that. And anything over 500 meg is something you want to look at, and you may have to do some database maintenance to pare that back. It's an indication that the database itself is getting large, or the files inside the backup folder are getting, you have stuff in there that may not be a file that should be in there. For instance, if we go into here, into the timeslips, and the actual database folder, if the backups are in here, that's going to increase the size. If there are documents in here, for instance, if you're using the document location folder, okay, so when you're creating PDF copies of bills and putting it into this folder, it's going to get backed up, and it increases the size of the backups. When I have a large client, a large database, I move those out of here and put them somewhere else to keep the backups cleaner and running quicker. So I wouldn't put them in this folder. So there's some couple of things you can look at when the size of the database gets large or slows down. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was my thoughts on retention. So how many backups? So if we're doing this every day, how many backups should we keep in here? And my policy that I tell all my clients is that what you want to do is basically have the best shot to recover. So, and the more backups you have, the better chance you have to recover, and the less pain you have to endure if something goes wrong. So what I found is that if you keep a month to a month and a half worth of daily backups, it should give you enough to be able to recover. And the other thing I like to do is keep every month end. So I'd keep a month, month and a half plus every month end. And you know, if that's starting to clog up your resources on the server, then some of my clients, I have them offload those to a flash drive of some sort. But it's worth having those. We used to keep every month end, and I used to recommend keeping every month end because a lot of my clients had to go back to find the accounts receivable balances as of month end, as of year end for their accountants. And it used to be you couldn't produce the report on a specific date. So we'd keep a backup to be able to restore, to produce the report, and then go back into the live database. But now Timeslips has this report which allows you to produce the AR balances as of a specific date. So that the reason to keep every month end isn't the same as it used to be. But I guess out of habit, I just like to have every month ends. So after the month end billing run, I like to keep that backup. So just to recap, the last month, month and a half, plus every month end is the kind of policy that I've given to all my clients. Okay. And then starting in version 2007, Timeslips made it very easy to do a backup. And what they did was they put in the file menu an option to schedule backups. They made it really simple. So what you can do is hit new and create a daily backup. Next, and you put the time that you'd want to do this backup, and I already have one for 2 a.m., so I'm going to just do this one for 3 a.m. When nobody's around, nobody should be in the database at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I would have it saved to my desktop. And the reason why I save it to the desktop is because sometimes the network connection from your machine to the server will go to sleep. And I don't know if you've noticed sometimes on these network connections, so the P drive or the Q drive, you might see a red X. That means that the connection between the workstation and the server has basically fallen asleep. And unless you wake it up first, you're going to get an error message saying that Timeslips can't see the data. So what I do is just have it saved to the desktop, and it works fine. Then in the morning, what you could do is come in and just move it from the desktop to the database backup folder on the server. The name should be Timeslips backup with the date. So it'll give you a unique backup every day. And then you just hit next and finish, and it's done. It's scheduled. So you get a backup every day, 3 a.m., sitting on your desktop when you come in the morning. It's done. Very easy. It takes no time at all. And you're protecting yourself against a potential failure and a disaster. In fact, so I recently had a client call me that was relying on the network personnel to do their backup, and they got a virus. So the network personnel tried all 10 days of retention that they had for backups, and they all had corruption in them. They weren't doing Timeslips backups, and they lost almost all their data. We had to go back to July 2013, so they lost 2 years, almost 2 years worth of data. And so, needless to say, I felt so bad, and my client was not. Yeah, he wasn't too happy. But if you just a little bit of protection to help yourself, it doesn't cost anything, and you could save yourself a lot of headaches. All right, let me go back to here and just talk a little bit about some of the other reasons why you might want to do a backup and have them around for some other reasons. And some of those, and not just for recovery of a failure. I've often had clients call me and they say their client is looking for a bill to be rerun. because of whatever reason. They need to, put in a credit or show them something different, or has to go to somebody else. And if that bill can't be undone, because in time slips we all know that only the last bill can be undone, what do you do? Go into Word and retype it? It's no. What we can do is use the backup, go to the period in which the bill needs to be recovered, restore a backup, make whatever changes you need to do, rerun the bill, print it. Your client is satisfied, and you're giving them a consistent image, right? Because if you're doing a Word bill, you got to have it match time slips. It looks different. That you want a consistent look and feel. So it makes sense to do it still out of time slips, and it's quicker and easier. And so we just use a backup, and then if we need to make credit adjustments or whatever adjustments we need to make to get the balances to match in the current database. So that's excuse me, a good use of the backups. The other another reason why, or a situation where you might need a backup, is if you're running multiple databases and something happens to one, or somebody gets by accident into the wrong one, and they're putting time or doing something in a database they shouldn't be doing it in. We can use a backup to help piece together multiple databases to get you back to whole. So that is another way we can use backups, not just for recovery. So just to recap where we are and what we've covered, we looked at creating backups and where to store them. We looked at your personal preferences and how to make sure that those were set right to put the backups in the right place. We talked about the actual backup process, the naming convention, the size of the backups, and how to make sure the backups are not including stuff that files that would expand the backups to make them slow, to make them too large. We talked about retention policy, scheduling backups, and finally some other situations where you might need to use a backup other than recovering from data. So if anybody has any questions, again, you can contact me at my office, email me. You can reach out to me through my website, and let me know if you have any questions. Okay. Hopefully your data will be secure well into the future. Okay, thanks.